am excited and privileged to be able to introduce. He really needs no introduction to this group. When we talk about Superhero You, change your brain, change the world, he exemplifies the changing the world. Dr. Peter Diamandis is the co-founder of Singularity University. How many people know of Singularity University with Ray Kurzweil? An incredible institution, literally going out there to talking about exponential technologies and solving the grand challenges. He also is the founder of XPrize. How many people are familiar with XPrize? Incredible work where they incentivize teams and individuals around the world to really take on the grand challenges of the world. And he's the recent best-selling co-author of Abundance, which everyone got in their bags. And so we're very grateful for Peter for the books also as well. And we're excited about his contribution today because he came out down here on a very, very, very tight schedule to be with us, to be able to share with you how to be able to unlock your superpowers so you can literally change the world. I mean, this is extremely, you want to take all kinds of notes on this because it's all about solving problems, either at a micro level, like yourself, the problems that you're going through, or at a macro level. So he's going to help you to unlock those unbelievable superpowers. It's my pure pleasure to introduce your friend, Dr. Peter Diamandis.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It is a pleasure to be here. What a great couple of days, huh? Amazing. So first of all, a real thank you to Jim and his wife, Alexis. Amazing, wonderful people. I am blessed to have them in my life and thankful for all the work that they and many of you in this community have done to help me get my message out. And this morning, my goal is to give back to you. I want to share with you the most important lessons I've learned, what I'm so absolutely passionate about, which is the knowledge that we're living in a day and age that whatever you want to do, whatever you want to create, whatever change you want to be in the world is possible. It's an extraordinary time. We are more empowered than ever before to be that superhero, to literally be the person who can solve the world's biggest problems and make your dreams come true. So, let me start with the first slide if I could. I've titled this Abundance, the Future is Better Than You Think, after the book that Stephen Kotler and I wrote, and you'll be meeting Stephen later this weekend. But what I want to do is actually cover three different subjects. The first is what I call 10 to the 9th plus thinking. And it's the concept that we're living in a day and age where any one of you can build a company to positively affect the lives of 1 billion people. What a magical time to be alive in, that you can actually touch the lives of 1 billion people on this planet. And that we've seen really many cases over and over. We all can name a half dozen cases from whether it's the founders of Google or Facebook, whatever it might be, of young, passionate individuals who are impacting the lives of 1 billion. So 10 to the 9th plus thinking. The second is crowdsourcing genius. And we'll talk about the XPrize and the concept of how do you get the smartest people in the world out there to help you solve the problems that you care about. Because if you just depend upon yourself, you're really, frankly, leaving out extraordinary power out there of other, if you would, superheroes who can help you solve your challenges. And the third concept I want to speak about is the notion of abundance, because it really is all about your mindset. If you believe something is impossible, then it is. It is, at least for you. And if you believe that you're living into a world that's falling apart, then you're going to make decisions and you're going to take actions that lead you down that path. And if you believe you're living into a world of abundance, then you're going to take actions that will help you create that world. And so we'll speak about that. Okay. So The concept that's really important for you to realize is that today a small team of entrepreneurs can literally do what only governments and large corporations could do before. That's a very powerful idea. If you stop and you think about how, as entrepreneurs, you're empowered with access to capital and access to technology to take on what, 30, 40, 50 years ago would have only been something that a large, if you would, industrial military complex or a nation could do. But now you can take that on. So the question becomes, what do you want to do in the world? If you can do anything, what do you want to do? And one of my messages I'll come back to at the end is that today it's really important what you take on. Right? What are the big challenges on the planet that you want to solve? Because you're on this planet, you're alive, you're empowered, you're here, you obviously have the commitment. So what are you taking on that's worthwhile, that's going to make your life worth living? What are you going to give back to this planet? What are you going to give back to humanity? So when I talk about the fact that we can really change the world in an extraordinary way and solve the world's big challenges, people scoff at this idea. The challenge is that most people are thinking about the world with a set of hardware and software that evolved millions of years ago. So our brains, the brains that we're here talking about, evolved on the plains of Africa hundreds of thousands or millions of years ago. And we haven't, I don't know about any of you, I haven't had a hardware update recently on my brain, and we're here talking about, to some degree, software updates. But if you think about that, on the plains of Africa, the world would be best described as local and linear. We lived, when our brains were evolving, we lived in a world that was local and linear. What do I mean by that? It was local in that everything that affected you was within a day's walk. If something happened on the other side of the planet, you didn't know about it. It was really just whatever you could walk to in terms of the tribes, in terms of the flocks, in terms of the foods that you went to. And it was linear in that the life of your great-grandparents, your parents, you, your kids, their kids, nothing changed generation to generation. Right? Nothing changed century to century or millennia to millennia. Life was pretty much constant. And it was under those conditions that our brains evolved. But today, the world is anything but that. It is literally global and exponential. It's global in that, literally something happens in China or India, we know about it seconds later. And it's exponential in that our world is not changing generation to generation, it's changing year to year. I mean, stop and think 1 second about the technologies that we depend on today that didn't exist a decade ago. Google was just coming online. Ubiquitous Wi-Fi, forget it. GPS, Skype video teleconferencing. I mean, all of these things were literally just at the conceptual mark. But today, take that away from us, and you're just like, oh my goodness. So the world has changed very, very, very quickly. Let me see if I can move this slowly. There we go. I'll tap it. So this yellow line is exponential growth. It represents, if you would, the technology that we're living in. Now, the red line represents humanity. And the fact that we as humans are pretty much flat, we're not evolving, we're not changing at a rapid rate compared to the fact that when you go and buy your computer today, it's twice as fast this year as the one you bought last year for the same price. The way we think causes difficulties, and it's causing what I call disruptive stress. So what do I mean by that? I mean that literally billion-dollar, 100-year-old companies are going out of business overnight because the board of directors are on that red line, but the technology around them is growing exponentially. At the same time, billion-dollar companies are coming out of no place. So Chad Hurley starts YouTube on his credit cards, sells it to Google for $1.4 billion 18 months later. Groupon goes from 0 to $6 billion valuation in 2 years. We're living in the time of the greatest wealth creation ever, driven by these exponential technologies. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. So here's a great example, Kodak. So Kodak was one of the mainstay companies of the United States. You know, a market cap of $28 billion back in 1996. Revenues of $16 billion, 140,000 employees. Today, it is literally a bankrupt company. What drove that? Well, if you think about this, Kodak actually invented the digital camera. Did you know that? Kodak invented the digital camera. But what happened? Kodak said, you know, we're Kodak. We only focus on high-quality materials, high-quality images. And this digital camera stuff, oh, it's very low grade, it's very low. But they didn't understand the growth of exponential technologies. They didn't understand that that low quality would soon surpass them, and they gave it up. And at the same time, here comes a company like Instagram, which is bought for $1 billion by Facebook with 13 employees. So we're living, I want to give you a sense that we're living in a different day and age, where the exponential technologies is literally putting out these billion-dollar companies out of business overnight and allowing entrepreneurs to create billions of dollars in value out of no place. It's an exciting time for you, a scary time for large companies. So what does exponential growth feel like? So I started a university back 4 years ago. This is the photo of the university with Ray Kurzweil. Jim mentioned it earlier, called Singularity University. What I realized was that there was no place on the planet that you could really go to get a feeling and an understanding of exponential technologies. You know, if you go to Harvard or MIT or UCSD or Harvard, wherever it might be, you end up focusing on getting a doctoral degree in such a narrow niche, right? You'll become the world's expert on an ion channel in a particular neuron in a particular insect. And in fact, you need a doctorate to understand someone else's doctoral thesis title, let alone the work. So it's a very crazy time, and that narrow, nano-niche education is really important for driving innovation. But I wanted to create something different. I want to create a university where you could literally step back and understand where are all the technologies going in all the most rapidly growing fields. So I went out there with Ray and was able to bring NASA, Google, Cisco, Genentech, Kauffman Foundation, Nokia, Autodesk on board as corporate partners and start this new university. So we teach about exponential technologies, which are the most powerful technologies you should be caring about. Now, a few examples. Cell phone penetration has been on exponential growth in greenfield areas like Africa. In 2000, there was a 2% penetration of cell phones. In 2009, a 28% penetration. And by 2013, it's expected to grow over 70%. So that's extraordinary in itself. If I were to take 30 linear steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth, I'd end up in the back corner over there. And any one of you could tell me where you're going to be in 30 linear steps. Because that's the way the software of our brain was programmed. We know how to do linear things because the world in which we evolved 1 million years ago was a linear world. And so we extrapolate linear. Our default is to think linear. But if I were to say to you, take 30 exponential steps, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and said, where are you going to be in 30 exponential steps? A simple doubling. Very few, unless you have it memorized, would say, I'm going to end up 1 billion meters away, or 26 times around the planet. And that disconnect between being able to say, well, I'm going to be at that corner, versus 26 times around the planet, is what is so powerful about exponentially growing technologies, simple doublings. They literally blow you away in their impact. And if you're not ready for it, it'll put you out of business. And if you are, it'll allow you to leapfrog your technology, your partners. So at Singularity University, for example, I had a chance to meet the early founders of Siri. Siri is that software on your iPhone 4S. And what was very cool about the conversation I had with them was that when they started Siri, the technology to allow that system to exist the processing speed, and the language, the ability to understand human language did not exist. They built the company anticipating where the technology would be in 4 years. Interesting idea. Because if they built the technology based on if they built the company based on the technology that existed right then, by the time they came to market, they'd be out of business. So it's literally, I'm not a sports guy, but it's skating to where the puck's going to be. So as you're building technologies, as you're building your business, are you anticipating where the technology is going to be in 2 years, 4 years, or 8 years? Because it's moving very quickly. Here's another example of exponential growth. This is from a friend, Eric Schmidt, the chairman of Google. This is a presentation he gave in Abu Dhabi back a couple years ago about the exponential growth of data, of technology. So we're living in the middle of a data explosion. Now, an exabyte is 1 billion gigabytes, just for reference. And a gigabyte is that little thumb drive you stick in the side of your computer. So imagine 5 exabytes. From the beginning of time through 2003, the world created 5 exabytes of data. That's how much was digitized during that period of time. From 2000 and in 2010, we created 5 exabytes in 2 days. In 2013, we're creating 5 exabytes in 10 minutes. So every time you pull out that camera and take a happy snap or a video, every time you go to the doctor, you're literally creating an information and knowledge explosion. So if you're in the information business, you've got lots of opportunity ahead of you. But that's part of the exponential world that we're growing in. All of that is made possible by this curve. How many of you have actually seen this curve before? Called Moore's Law. So it's the notion that computer speeds are doubling every 18 to 24 months. Mr. Moore, one of the founders of Intel, noticed this in the late 50s and early 60s, and it's held true for a long time. I take you back to your high school math. This is a curve on a log scale. So on the left-hand axis, a log scale. It's the amount of computational speed you can buy for a $1,000 investment. And what it shows you is that over the last 100 years, the amount of computation that you could buy for a $1,000 investment has been growing exponentially. Now, there are 2 things I want you to take away from this curve. Number one, this is on a log curve. So exponential growth on a log curve is a straight line. But this line isn't straight, it's curving upwards. What that means is that the rate at which computers are getting faster is itself getting faster. The second thing I want you to take away is that even over the last 100 years, as we've had World War I and World War II, recessions, depressions, boom times and good times, the rate at which computers have been getting faster has been pretty smooth. It's independent of what's going on in humanity. It's the result of faster computers being used to build faster computers. So if that's the case, it's pretty much a good bet to believe that the rate at which these computers are getting faster is going to continue. So what happens if that's the case? Well, this is a curve from a book called The Singularity is Near, which I commend to all of you. It's Ray Kurzweil's book, which is still a fantastic cornerstone. And what he shows, again, you've got a log curve on the left, you've got the next 100 years going forward. What it says is in 2010, the average $1,000 laptop, like the kind powering this presentation, was calculating at 100 billion calculations per second, 10 to the 11th cycles per second. Well, that's interesting. That's nice. Maybe you don't care about it. But what's interesting is that 12 years from now, by 2023, at that continued growth rate, the average $1,000 computer is calculating at 10 to the 16th cycles per second. And if you ask a neurophysiologist how fast does the brain calculate, they'll tell you 10 to the 16th cycles per second. The ability of our brain to recognize images and sound and process it is how fast a computer is going to be that you can go to Best Buy and buy in just 12 years. So what does that mean? Well, it doesn't stop there, because 25 years later, the average $1,000 laptop is now calculating at the rate of the entire human race. Now talk about your kids being able to do their homework easier. So we're in for a wild ride of capability that any one of us, anyone on the planet, will have at their fingertips. So at SU, we run a 10-week graduate program for graduate students. We run a 1-week executive program for executives. And because this is quick learning, I'm going to give you a 10-minute version of that 1-week program. So I'm going to hit on a few of the technologies to help you understand the power that you now have to change the world. So the first one is the field of artificial intelligence. It's powering many of our web applications, from Google to eBay to Amazon, but it's far more powerful than that. How many of you actually saw the winning of Jeopardy by Watson? Raise your hand here. So a good number, more than most audiences, about 20%. So Jeopardy is a game that I'm terrible at, but it's a game of human language nuance. You make a statement and you have to identify the right question. And it's not an easy game to play. And it's all about the nuance of the human language and the statements being made. So IBM built their latest supercomputer called Watson, named after the founder of IBM. And it went up against the two Jeopardy champions, the all-time cash winner and the guy who had won the most number of games. And I looked for the title, the magazine title, that really reflected what happened. I love this one, Watson Vanquishes Human Opponents, because Watson decimated them. What I do is show you a clip for 1 minute, so I'll make sure audio is up, of what this competition looked like.
Ken, you're in the first position. Please make a selection.
I've never said this on TV. Chicks dig me for 200, please, Jimmy.
Kathleen Kenyon's excavation of this city, mentioned in Joshua, showed the walls had been repaired 17 times. Watson.
What is Jericho?
Correct.
400, same category.
This mystery author and her archaeologist hubby dug in hopes of finding the lost Syrian city of Urkesh. Watson.
Who is Agatha Christie?
Correct. Watson.
Who is Mary Leakey?
You're right. Watson.
What is Crete?
Yes.
Let's finish Chicks Dig Me.
And Mount.
I love that. I swear they did that on purpose. So, but think about the power that Watson has to understand what's going on and to give an accurate answer. And imagine, if you would, now Watson available to anyone with a cell phone who wants to have a conversation and ask a question. Talk about reinventing the education process or the healthcare process, and we'll come back to that. And what makes Watson possible is computational power. What used to be the most scarce capability on the planet, if you needed to have a computer dedicated to you for a month 30 years ago, you'd have to be the chairman of MIT's computer science department and drag it away from the other researchers. Today, we've all got extraordinary capability literally in our bags, probably 2 or 3 computers at home, and it's literally free. It's the cost of electricity. And now add to that what's going on in all of the cloud computing capability, where anyone who wants can have not 100, but 1,000 computers working for a minute or an hour or a day for you. It's not just you. It's someone living in the middle of Pakistan or India or China who wants access to this. It's literally the most scarce resource is now abundant and available to anyone. So computational capability is one of the areas that's growing exponentially and changing how we do everything. Another field we talk about is digital manufacturing, 3D printing. This is the closest thing today to the Star Trek replicator. And Rod Roddenberry and I talk about this a lot, and how it's going to transform society. And this is about democratizing manufacturing around the planet. This is about allowing anyone to conceive of something and then build it right then. So these are a series of devices. You all know how a regular printer works, right? You basically, it deposits a thin layer of black carbon on a piece of paper, and you get letters, and that's a printer. Well, these 3D printers actually deposit layer after layer after layer and build up from the bottom up a three-dimensional structure of any complexity. Structures within structures, and they're beginning to use multiple materials. Not only plastics where they started, but now rubber and glass and titanium. And there are even companies, groups like Tony Atala working on using human cells and 3D printing human organs. So let me show you some of the structures that can be built. So this is a polyhedron within a polyhedron within a polyhedron, three-dimensional structure printed all at once. These are high-temperature titanium turbine blades. This is a person who lost their lower limb, had his other limb scanned, and 3D printed a prosthetic. This is a full-scale motorcycle in the lobby of Autodesk up in San Francisco. And this is a device that is printing 3D concrete walls. Imagine, if you would, being able to 3D print a house in a day. Imagine, if you would, having 1,000 house designs and you say, I want that one. And it prints the walls and everything in place. Pretty cool, huh? What I want to have shown you with this first part of this presentation is the idea that small teams are empowered to do extraordinary things. Are you with me there? The power that you have to use AI and robots and synthetic biology and so forth, these are not mega companies. These are entrepreneurial companies doing a lot of this work. And so you may not know the technology, but you may know the business side, the finance side, and you can partner with a technologist and go and attack the problem you want. So if, in fact, we're living in a day and age where anyone can do these kinds of powerful things, what do you focus them on? How do you focus on solving the world's biggest problems? Because remember this, please. We're living in a time where the world's biggest problems, the grand challenges, are the world's biggest opportunities. Solve hunger, food, water, energy, healthcare. You have the gratitude of the world and you become a billionaire in the process. How beautiful is that alignment? Why would you want to do anything else? Why wouldn't you want to solve and focus on the world's biggest problems? Because that's the life you can live, the extraordinary life you can have. So for me, my mission, my ethos in life growing up, I was born in the 60s during the Apollo program, watching Star Trek, inspired by this vision of what could be. And I drank all the Tang there was, you know, literally. And I ended up saying, I want to go to the stars. That's my mission in life. Not only to go myself, but to take other people with me. And I became enamored and committed. And I went and got a 6-pack of degrees for the purpose of becoming a NASA astronaut. Realized at the end of that process that my chances of becoming an astronaut were probably less than my chances of becoming an NBA All-Star. And at 5'5", those aren't that high. And so I committed to myself to do it privately. And I've built a dozen companies in the space world. One of my companies takes people to the space station. We've flown 8 clients to the International Space Station. It's only $50 million a pop. I've got 3 tickets. Actually, we've sold one. We have 2 tickets available for the next few years. Another company is called Zero Gravity. We've flown people into zero G. How many people flown here on our airplane? I know you have, Rod. But it's an extraordinary experience. We flew 12,000 people into zero G, including Stephen Hawking. You may have seen that. It was one of my proudest moments, taking the world's expert in gravity, who'd been wheelchair-bound for 42 years, and giving him the freedom of floating in zero G. That was really very proud of that. And I had started a launch company, a satellite communications company, a group called the Rocket Racing League, and I knew how difficult it was to build the private spaceships. And kudos to Elon Musk, who yesterday, SpaceX and Dragon docked with the space station. Yeah? Really amazing, amazing commitment that man has made, and what he's done is literally historic and world-changing. So I read one day, as I thought about how am I going to open the space frontier, I read one day about this man, Charles Lindbergh. And I had no idea that Lindbergh crossed the Atlantic in 1927 to win a prize. I thought he woke up one day and just decided to fly east. But in fact, there was this Frenchman, Raymond Ortegue, who was born in the Pyrenees Mountains, came over penniless around the turn of the century as a busboy, worked his way up in a hotel, eventually was able to purchase the Hotel Lafayette, and this was just after World War I, in which aviation made its early debut on the scene. And he, unlike other people, saw the potential of aviation, not just as something to use to drop bombs on people, but to connect the countries of this world. And so what he did was he opened up this vision of the future, and he offered up a $25,000 prize for the first person to fly between New York and Paris. Now, in 1919, when he offered this prize, everyone laughed at him. They said, "It's crazy, you can't fly from New York to Paris. That's insane." 8 years later, in 1927, 9 different companies had spent $400,000 trying to win this guy's $25,000 prize. And Lindbergh was the most unlikely guy to do it. In fact, the most likely guy to win this was called Admiral Byrd. He was the first person to fly to the North Pole, and he did it in incremental hops along the way. He was so sure he was going to win that he loaded up his airplane with champagne in China so he could celebrate when he lands in Paris, and he overweights it and he crashes on takeoff. Lindbergh, on the other hand, had been flying just for 2 years. He was so young and so early in his flying career that no one would sell him an airplane or an engine. They were so sure he was going to lose. And they called him the Flying Fool. But literally, he made that trip across the Atlantic, and he became the most famous human on the planet. A $25,000 prize drove $400,000 in expenditures by all the teams. And by putting up a prize, instead of backing Admiral Byrd and all the other teams, Raymond Ortegue automatically backed Lindbergh. How cool is that? And said, "Oh my God." And by the time I had finished reading this book, I said, "I'm going to start a prize to open up spaceflight. I don't know who out there is going to build the spaceships, but by putting up a prize, I know I'm going to back the winner." So I started researching everything I could about prizes. And as it turns out, one of the very first prizes ever was put up almost 300 years ago by the British Admiralty. Now, the British Admiralty were dominating the seas, but they were losing all of their sailors on the rocks because one could determine their latitude but not their longitude. And so as people came back to shore, they would hit the rocks and their ships would be lost. So the British Admiralty, the British government said, this is one of the most important problems of our time. And they put up literally a king's fortune for the person who could figure out how to accurately tell longitude. Well, they were so sure that this was going to be won by an astronomer that they stacked the deck of the judging committee with astronomers, because astronomers were the smartest dudes at the time. And this guy came along, John Harrison, who was a watchmaker. And he came up with a clock that was so accurate in the humidity and the rocking seas of the boats that it was able to tell longitude. But the astronomers were so sure that that wasn't the right way to do it that they refused to give him the prize money. And so I learned in that moment in time that sometimes experts are the ones who can tell you exactly how it can't be done. All right? Experts, if you think about it, are committed to keeping things the way they are because they're experts in the way things are. And if all of a sudden that becomes totally disrupted, they're no longer experts. So interestingly enough, you see that over and over again in society, like the National Institute of Health, the NIH, in its peer review process, where the experts review the research they should fund. Do you know that the NIH funds more researchers over the age of 70 than under the age of 30? So as I learned about prizes, I'm going to create a prize to open up the space frontier. And by the time I had finished reading Lindbergh's book, the idea of the X prize had come to mind. Now, I didn't know who was going to put up the money for the prize, so I called it the X prize, where the X was a variable to be replaced by the name of the person who put up the money. It also stood well for experimental and Roman numeral 10. It really worked. And this competition was going to be one where, to win, a team had to build a privately funded ship. Now, $10 million was enough money to attract the entrepreneurs. I didn't want them attracting the Boeings and the Lockheeds. I wanted entrepreneurs coming and doing this a very different way. A 3-person spaceship meant at the end of the competition, there was a business to be had, with a pilot and 2 paying passengers, or an autopilot and 3 very brave passengers. And then we actually officially defined space as 100 kilometers. There was no official definition of space, because a nation owns its airspace, but doesn't own the space over its head. So we had to create a finish line. Originally, we had it at 100 miles altitude, and we did the re-entry thermal characteristics of how hot and fast are you coming in from 100 miles coming into the atmosphere. Said it's too fast, too hot. We lowered it to 100 kilometers, knowing full well most Americans will know the difference between 100 miles and 100 kilometers anyway. The fact that we're all laughing is really sad. And then to win the prize, you had to do 2 flights within 2 weeks, which really meant that the cost of the second flight was the fuel and the touch labor. A very simple set of rules to open up the space frontier. So the challenge was, I didn't have $10 million. I was able to get funding from the city of St. Louis to begin this process. And I made the decision, the choice, to risk it all. And I made the decision to go and announce the $10 million competition before I had the money. I had 2 trustees resign on the spot. But I knew it was the commitment that I had to making it happen that mattered more than anything else. And so I also learned another thing that I want to share with you as we talk about learning here at SuperheroYou, which is that in our minds, we have what I call a line of credibility. And if you announce a big idea below this line of credibility, people dismiss it right away. And then we also have this line of super credibility. And if you announce something above the line of super credibility, people go, oh my God, when's it going to happen? How can I be involved? So on stage with me, I didn't have 1 astronaut, I had 20 astronauts. I had the Lindbergh family, I had the head of NASA, the head of the FAA. So when we announced this $10 million private spaceflight prize, we got front page around the world, and no one asked, do you have any money? We did not. Do you have any teams? No, we didn't. But I had the utter sure confidence that I would find the capital. I mean, who wouldn't want to pay $10 million after someone actually pulled it off? So I set out and spoke to CEO after CEO and CMO after CMO. I sat down with Fred Smith. I sat down with Richard Branson twice. I sat down with the heads of all the car manufacturers. And I said, you know, here's the vision, here's what you get, here's the publicity, here's the creation we create. And they all said the same thing. Why isn't NASA doing this? Can anyone really pull it off? And isn't someone going to die trying? I was like, oh my God, how risk adverse everybody's gotten. You know, ladies and gentlemen, doing anything big in the world, anything meaningful, anything that really makes a big difference requires a tremendous risk. Risk to your reputation, risk to your wallet, risk to your life. If it was easy, it would have been done already. And one of the things I talk about is how we're killing ourselves in this nation by how risk adverse we've gotten. So, at the end of the day, I knew that the battle was between myself not giving up versus making it happen. So it was literally 5.5 years later. I was in my home, I remember exactly where I was, and I was reading this copy of Fortune magazine, in which I read about this woman, Anusha Ansari, who had just sold her company called Telecom Technologies to Sonos Networks for $1.2 billion. And in the bio, it says, her dream is to fly on a suborbital flight into space. And I read that line like 3 times because I was like, what, am I making this up? And I made, and you know this because you've done it in your own lives, there was a moment where, click, this is the person and I'm going to find her. And she's going to back this competition. And I eventually tracked her down. She was vacationing in Hawaii for the last 2 months. It was an asset purchase of her company. All of her employees were gone. I tracked down one of her past executive secretaries who promised me that if I FedExed a package to her, she would FedEx it to Anusha. And she did. That was Anusha's first meeting when she got back. And Anusha and her husband, Hamid Ansari, agreed on the spot to back it. And we named it the Ansari XPrize in their honor. The X, it took me so long to find the Ansari family, the X sort of stuck around. And lo and behold, the competition worked again. We had 26 teams from 7 countries who spent $100 million going after this $10 million competition. And not too far from here, about 4 hours north up the coast, in the early morning of October 4th, 2004, this is the scene. This is just at dawn, just before sunrise, when Spaceship One comes out onto the tarmac, nestled underneath the wing of White Knight 1. We had 30,000 people come from around the planet. Literally, you could see miles and miles of headlights as they came down Highway 15. And here's the vehicle under power, burning nitrous oxide laughing gas and polybutadiene tire rubber as the fuel, a very non-traditional fuel that the traditional aerospace companies would never have used. And here it is at altitude, and then that winning moment afterwards. On the far left is Anusha and Amir Ansari. Next to them, myself. Next to me is Paul Allen, who backed Burt Rutan with $26 million to win the $10 million competition. And, in all fairness, Paul made all his money back and then some. And Burt really thought he could do it for $10 million. They're all optimists when they begin this competition. Next to Paul Allen is Burt Rutan. Next to Burt Rutan is Brian Binney, who was the pilot on this winning vehicle. And next to Brian Binney is Richard Branson, who the week before comes in and licenses the rights for Spaceship One to create Virgin Galactic after turning me down twice for funding the competition in the first place. But that's why he's Richard Branson. But I am thankful for him because, he turned this from a historic event into the launching of an industry, right? And that was important because it wasn't just the moment, it was the opening of an industry. And any one of you can now buy tickets to go and fly to space if you desire. So we had 10 billion media impressions around the world, worth well over $100 million. I had many of the CEOs who turned me down saying, damn, I wish I had backed your prize. I know. I'll come back to you next time. And Google put us up on the front page, which was very cool. Hooked up to our servers, almost took down our website that day. And let me take you back there with a short video. We're announcing today something called the XPrize, a $10 million contest to privately build a spaceship that's able to carry 3 individuals, fly to 100 kilometers altitude, and do that twice inside of 2 weeks.
I have never been myself as creative as I have eyeballing this goddamn prize.
Hello and welcome to Mojave here in the high desert of California on this incredible day. Now you are going to witness history in the making.
Release arm fire. The Ansari XPRIZE inspired international competition, drove regulatory reform, and made history.
The XPRIZE with $10 million.
It ignited a personal spaceflight revolution.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. But wait, there's more. And, I mean, one of the coolest things was when Spaceship One was hoisted next to the Spirit of St. Louis that inspired it 75 years earlier, right? And I think about, what will this competition inspire 75 years from now? Will it be the first starships to go to other planets? Will it be, you know, the greatest exploration we've ever had? But it was a magical moment. And you can think about incentive competitions, which one of my missions is to reinvent philanthropy, to help people understand that there's a more efficient way to drive breakthroughs in the things that you care about. So one of the attributes of these competitions are they're highly leveraged. You get 10 to 40 times the prize money spent by all the teams trying to win your money. How cool is that? You only pay the winner. You don't pay anyone with a good idea who doesn't do it, anyone who tries, anyone who gets really close. You pay the person who actually pulls it off. It's pay for performance. You don't back only one solution. We had 26 different ideas. Yes, one made it, but a number of the other ones are still going on as business ventures. And you get non-traditional solutions. You get the watchmaker instead of the astronomer. And then the leverage. You know, we had $2.5 million from St. Louis that allowed us to attract the $10 million Ansari donation that drove $100 million in team expenditures. And there's been well over $1 billion invested in the marketplace since then to open up commercial spaceflight. And so for me, it's like one of the smartest ways to drive breakthroughs in the world. And we work in team with philanthropists, corporations, foundations to help them make more efficient use and do bigger and bolder breakthroughs on the planet, because we can. So we've built an extraordinary group of trustees and benefactors, just a few of them here, from Larry Page, who's on a board, and Dean Kamen, Craig Venter, Ansari family. James Cameron just joined, Ratan Tata, who's chairman of Tata Industries, Ray Kurzweil, my partner at SU, Elon Musk, Jim Giannopoulos, the chairman of Fox, Wendy Schmidt. I'd also like to recognize in the audience Rod and Heidi Roddenberry, who are benefactors of the foundation and helping us in underwriting some extraordinary work that we look forward to announcing when it gets going. And also Lee Stein, who's been a very close friend and benefactor of the XPRIZE for the last, I don't know, Lee, 8 years. But thank you all for your support. One of the competitions we have going right now is called the Google Lunar XPRIZE. And all you've got to do to win this $30 million is build a robot, land it on the surface of the moon, send back photos and videos, rove a half a kilometer, and send back more photos and video. And so important is it to NASA that NASA has matched that $30 million with $30 million of contracts, because it's expectation that these teams are going to drive the cost down of exploring the cosmos by 10 to 50-fold. We have 26 of those teams right now around the world. And imagine this. These are teams of 20, 30 individuals doing something that only the US and the Soviet Union have ever done. Amazing days to be alive. Does it have to be a $10 million prize? No, it does not. So remember the BP oil spill that was going on and on and on and on? Jim Cameron had just joined our board and said, you got to do something about this. I care about the oceans. This is terrible. And when we looked at what we could do, we realized that one of the most important things we could do is figure out how to reinvent, how to clean up the oil on the ocean surface before it hit the coastline, where it decimated the coastlines. And it turns out that between the Exxon Valdez 21 years earlier and the BP oil spill, the way that oil spills were cleaned up hadn't changed, not an iota. So what we did was we announced this competition. Wendy put up $1.4 million. Wendy Schmidt, we called it the Wendy Schmidt Oil Cleanup X Prize. We challenged teams around the world to at least double the rate at which you can clean up oil spills. So we went to the world's largest oil spill cleanup facility, which is located in New Jersey. And we asked teams to at least double the 1,100 gallons per minute oil spill cleanup. 350 teams around the world entered. We narrowed it down to the top 10 teams that went head-to-head in this facility. The winning team was able to increase the oil spill cleanup rate a factor of 4, and since then has figured out how to do a factor of 6. But what was really cool was that 7 of the 10 teams were able to double it, to meet our minimum. One of the teams that did that was a family out of Alaska that built the dad's design. Another team was a team that met in a Las Vegas tattoo parlor. Check this out.
My full-time job back home is running a tattoo studio in Las Vegas.
We get asked all the time, how long have you been in the oil industry? And well, counting today?
You know, you never know where on the planet that brilliant idea, that breakthrough idea is going to come from. It's what Clay Shirky calls cognitive surplus. So that idea was best expressed by this guy, Bill Joy, the chief scientist at Sun, who said, no matter who you are, most of the smartest people in the world work for someone else. Now, that's an interesting comment to think about, right? Even if you're Google or Microsoft or whomever, there's a lot of smart people out there in the world. You can't hire them all. And no one really experienced that more than my friend Rob McEwen. Rob is one of my board members at the X Prize. And unlike me, at least, I don't know about any of you, he went and bought a gold mine. And in 1989, Rob bought a gold mine in northern Ontario. And he spent a good amount of his time gathering geological data to understand how much gold was in the mines. And by 1998, he went to his geologist and he said, okay, I need to build a processing facility. How much gold is in the mines? And they gave him an answer which is not really good for keeping your job. He said, we have no idea. And Rob did something very unusual. He said, let me ask you a question. Where do gold mines keep their geological data normally? They'd keep it sort of, behind a firewall in their safe. It's like the crown jewels of a company. Well, he did just the opposite. He said, I'm going to give all of you my data, put it up on the web, put it on CD-ROMs, and offer a $500,000 prize to the team that can show me where to find the next 6 million ounces of gold. Well, incredibly, 1,400 requests came in, 125 entries from around the world looking at his data. The top 3 winners showed him where to find 6 million ounces of gold. $1 million investment netted a $3 billion return. Now here's the punchline. The 3 teams that won, 2 were in New Zealand, 1 was in Russia. None of them came to his gold mine. They just looked at the data in a different way than his experts. So, where is X Prize going? I'm very proud. One of the competitions we launched at CES this year, I was on stage with Paul Jacobs, the chairman of the Qualcomm Foundation, the CEO of Qualcomm, announcing the $10 million Qualcomm Tricorder X Prize. This is a $10 million competition for a device, for the team who can build a device that can diagnose any consumer better than a board-certified doctor. So I want you to imagine this. This is a device that's going to bring, remember Watson? Watson on the cloud to anyone with a cell phone with lab on a chip, digital imaging, cloud computing, all of those components. Imagine a device that you talk to, you cough on it, you do a finger blood prick, it does a DNA analysis, an RNA analysis of the pathogens in your sputum, and it can diagnose you at 2 a.m. in the morning at home. Or if you're in the middle of Tanzania or Kenya, and it does an RNA analysis of a virus it doesn't recognize, it calls the CDC in the first place to prevent the pandemic. So what's really cool is this competition we expect to be won in the next 4 years. We announced it in January, and we have 186 teams already around the world competing. So part of this is making the Star Trek universe really happen. We announced yet on Thursday a companion prize called the Nokia Sensing X Challenge for the sensors that will be part of these competitions. So literally a global competition for the next generation of biometric sensors. This is a competition about our environment, one that I'm working on with Lee. It's called the $10 million Tri-State Carbon Capture XPrize. So it takes about 30% of the energy of a coal plant to capture the carbon. 30% of the energy or 30% of the money. This is a competition that flips the model, and it says this company, Tri-State, is going to make one of its coal facilities available for any team to plug in to the smokestack and take the effluent from the smokestack at temperature, pressure, and high CO2. And it says the team that can turn that CO2 into the most valuable product that is more valuable than the cost of capturing the CO2 wins. Imagine if you can turn carbon capture from a cost center into a profit center. Wouldn't that reinvent the world? Pretty cool, huh? So we're about half funded on that competition and hope to launch it later this year. One of the competitions another competition we're half funded on is called the Autonomous Auto XPrize. This is going to be a competition among all the auto manufacturers and Google and others for the first autonomous car in a race to go from LA to New York, fully autonomously, on and off the highways. It's the cross-country rally where you can watch and see these cars. The goal here is to reinvent people's vision of the future of driving, to give you back your time, your lives, and a lot of fuel. In New York, 2 weeks ago, there's an organization called the Robin Hood Foundation that is combating poverty. They raise $150 million that they give away per year. This year, they raised $19 million at a dinner to announce a series of Robin Hood poverty-fighting X Prizes. So we're going to be designing X Prizes to look at the root causes of poverty and how do we fight them. So those are competitions that are in development, either fully or partially funded. Here's some of the concepts that we're working on. Organogenesis. Imagine going from a skin cell to a transplantable heart, liver, lung, or kidney. You don't have to wait for someone to have an auto accident anymore. You can grow your own replacement organ. An earthquake prediction X Prize. Imagine being able, if you could, out there in our digital universe, may be the data to give us knowledge of an earthquake 30 minutes early. How transformative would that be for people's lives? And an education X Prize. One of my commitments that I've made that I'm always looking for capital support to help do is how do we create a series of X Prizes to reinvent education? Because as Jim knows, and Jim and Alexis are part of our team to help think this through, we're living with an educational system that is hundreds of years old. And ladies and gentlemen, we have the potential today to reinvent how we educate our kids, to give every kid an education that they're so passionate about, that is so personalized, that they love. So one of our missions here is to design and launch a series of education X Prizes in the near future. So innovation is a state of mind. If you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right. So what does it take to innovate? Well, In looking at all of the XPRIZE teams, this is what I've seen and learned. And let me break this out for you. So first of all, it's about an audacious vision. People need an audacious vision to shoot for. We're driven by that. We love a challenge. As humans, we've evolved to love a challenge. You need a mindset, and you need to give birth to that mindset and that audacious vision above the line of super credibility. You need a clear, objective goal. You know, without a target, you'll miss it every time. So what are you going for? What is an audacious vision? And how do you know if you've gotten there? Constraints. Constraints are really important. People talk about thinking out of the box. I want you to think in a really small box. You see, humans are lazy. If you give you all the time and money and people and so forth, we take it. We go and do it. We don't take risks. But if you say you've only got a small amount of time, a small amount of money, what happens? Most people go, I can't do it. Nope, not going to even try. The people who say, okay, I'm going to give it a shot, say, I can't do it the same old way I've always done it because there's not enough money and time to do that. So I'm going to have to try something brand new. I'm going to have to take a big risk. Yes, the majority of people fail, but those who pull it off have, by definition, created a breakthrough. Creating an environment where you're willing to fail, willing to risk. You know that old saying, failure is not an option. If failure is not an option, either is innovation. If you can't fail, in Silicon Valley, you know, when I'm hiring somebody, I'm looking for someone who's failed. I'm looking for someone who's had a series of failures and successes, that would be nice, but someone who's learned, someone who's tried. Because, you know, failure, if you can fail often, fail quickly, then you're iterating, then you're trying new ideas, and then perhaps you'll have something different. If you can't fail, you're stuck to incrementalism. And then finally, small, diverse teams, open participation, not pre-guessing where the breakthrough is going to come from. So, the last section I want to talk to you about is the notion that we're heading towards a world of abundance. And when I say that, people say, you know, really? Really, we're heading towards a world of abundance? Haven't you read the news? Haven't you heard about the economic collapse in Europe and these terrorist groups and so forth? And oh my God, what are you smoking, Peter? But the fact of the matter is, we're living in an extraordinary world. Do you know that these last 100 years, the average human lifespan has more than doubled? Every nation on this planet has become wealthier and better educated. Reading, literacy has gone from 25% to over 80% globally. We're living in the most peaceful time ever in human history. The average per capita income for every human on this planet has more than tripled. The cost of food has come down 13-fold, the cost of energy 20-fold, the cost of transportation 100-fold, and the cost of communications 1,000-fold. And the forces that created that are only accelerating. The challenge is that each of us on our iPad, our iPhone, our newspaper, our radio, our TV, are getting fed to us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all the negative news. You see, your brains are structured to pay far more attention to the negative news than the positive news. Because 1,000,000 years ago, a piece of negative news you missed meant that you were dead. A piece of positive news didn't matter. So when a piece of negative news comes along, you go, oh my God, what is that? You pay attention, you focus. It turns on your entire brain. And because of that, the news media knows this. Negative news is the drug, and the news media is the drug pusher. And you know about every piece of negative news on the planet. Every local warfare, every murder, every piece of economic disaster, fed to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. No wonder you think the world is going to hell in a handbasket. But do you know that we're living during the most peaceful time ever in human history? Or the other things I mentioned? And that the forces that created that are only accelerating? And that's what led me to write that book, which you all have. Because you need to understand the facts and the figures. In the back of the book that Stephen Kotler, who you'll meet later, and I wrote, we put 90 different charts of the data so you can look at the data yourself. So we hit number 2 in the New York Times list and number 1 on Amazon, and with an extraordinary help of Jim Quick and Joe Polish and many of the community that are here today. And I thank you all for that. We were on the New York Times bestseller list for 9 weeks. And my mission is to change the meme of how people think about the future, because what you believe affects the world. And so, for me, we have the ability to literally create a world of abundance. Not a world of luxury, a world of possibility, where the basic needs of every man, woman, and child on this planet are being met. You see, technology is a resource liberating force. Technology takes that which was scarce and makes it abundant. One of the examples I give to materialize this for you is this one. On the left is Napoleon III. The year is 1840. And Napoleon III invited the king of Siam over for dinner. And Napoleon fed his troops using silver utensils. Napoleon himself ate with gold utensils. And to impress the king of Siam, he was fed with aluminum utensils. You see, aluminum in 1840 was the most scarce metal on the planet. You can't go and dig up aluminum in the ground. It doesn't exist in its pure form. Even though the Earth is 8.3% aluminum by weight, all of the aluminum is bound with oxygen and silicates to form bauxite. And it was so difficult to extract aluminum from bauxite, it was worth more than platinum and gold. Which is why the tip of the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. is made of aluminum. It was built in the same decade. And then this technology called electrolysis came along. And electrolysis made it so easy to extract aluminum from bauxite, it made it abundant. We use it now, aluminum foil, aluminum cans, aluminum airplanes. We use it with a throwaway mindset. So I think about the power of technology, the exponential technologies I spoke about in the beginning, to transform and liberate. So we talk about energy scarcity. But ladies and gentlemen, we're living in a world that is bathed in 5,000 times more energy than the human race uses in a year. Did you know that? And the rate at which solar energy is growing on this planet is doubling every 3 years. If we're at 1% today, people go, it's only 1% solar penetration. But remember that 26 times around the Earth? If you're doubling every 3 years and you start at 1%, you're only 20 years away from meeting 100% of our energy needs. But guess what? 3 years later, you have twice as much, then 4 times, then 8 times, then 16 times, and 32 times. So what happens when we have 32 times more energy than the human race consumes? Extraordinary things. One of them is water abundance. We talk about water wars on this planet. But we live on a water planet. 70% of this planet is covered with water. Yes, 97.5% is salt water. 2% is ice. We fight over 0.5% of the water on this planet. But there's extraordinary technology coming down the pike that's going to allow us to transform that water. Water out of nanomaterials, out of technology that Dean Kamen has created that if you want to ask me about it, I'll talk about in the Q&A. Think about this. This Maasai warrior in the middle of Kenya on his mobile phone has better mobile communications than President Reagan did 25 years ago. Right? And if they're on a smartphone on Google, they've got access to more knowledge and information than President Clinton did 15 years ago. Better yet, on their smartphone, they've got video teleconferencing, HD cameras, GPS, libraries of books, stuff that you and I would have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars for, free on their smartphone, even though they make only $5 a day. And we talked about the tricorder, the Qualcomm tricorder, bringing individuals around the world healthcare abundance. Or imagine Watson being able to know what every student loves, giving them education abundance. You might have read about the fact that about a month ago, I announced a company called Planetary Resources, where instead of thinking about limited metals and minerals on Earth, I think about Earth as a crumb in a supermarket filled with resources. So we've been backed by some of the wealthiest people on the planet to go out there and actually identify those asteroids that have platinum group metal, strategic metals, the metals that are powering our batteries and battering our VCRs and our computers and so forth, and instead of digging them up in the ground, be able to get them from the cosmos. And we're building our first generation of satellites called the Arcid series that are going up in 24 months to begin to look for these. These are millions of asteroids, many of which come very close to the Earth. So we can go and gain access to these and identify the most valuable ones, go out there, and within these next decade or two, begin to extract resources from these to really open up the cosmos. So my final slides are about the rising billion. So this is Earth's population. We just crossed the 7 billion mark. And people are concerned about population growth. Well, let me tell you, the one thing you can do to reduce the population growth rate on this planet is to educate and make a population healthier and better educated. Time and time again, that reduces the population growth rate of every country. So these green lines represent internet penetration. In 2010, we had just shy of 2 billion people online. By 2020, that number is growing from 2 billion to 5 billion people. That means that 3 billion new minds who've never been heard from before are entering into the global economy. What do these people want? What do they desire? What will they discover? What will they invent? They represent, for me, the greatest asset humanity has. 3 billion new minds focused on solving problems, innovating, adding to the conversation. They also represent tens of trillions of dollars flowing into the global economy. So I'll end on that note and saying my mission is to create abundance by creating the meme out there. The meme that abundance is possible. We're living in a day and age where small teams can transform the world, where you can make your dreams come true. My question to you is, what are you committed to doing? How are you going to change the world? How are you going to create a world of abundance? What are the dreams that are so bold that they scare you, that you're going to go and make happen during your lifetime? Thank you.